Chapter 1. A World. Dreaming in peace, you stand on the wide, tree-lined boulevards of Paris in the spring of 1910. The air is soft with the scent of fresh bread and blooming flowers. Horse-drawn carriages clatter gently along cobblestone streets, as well-dressed ladies with feathered hats stroll past cafes filled with laughter and cigarette smoke. The world, at least on the surface, seems to be at peace. More than 4 decades have passed since the last major war in Europe. A generation has grown up without the sound of cannon fire, believing perhaps naively that civilization had moved beyond such barbarism. You look around and see progress. The Eiffel Tower still gleams with modern wonder, barely 20 years old. Across the Channel, London hums with the rhythm of industry and empire. In Berlin, grand avenues echo with the pride of a newly unified Germany. Vienna dances to the waltz of old nobility. St. Petersburg dazzles with imperial ambition, and in Rome the ghosts of ancient grandeur whisper in marble ruins while the modern world builds around them. The world you stand in is one of empires and elegance, of monocles and moustaches, of handwritten letters and telegraph lines. It is a world run by kings and kaisers, tsars and emperors, where diplomacy is conducted by top hats and telegrams, and wars, if they come at all, are assumed to be brief, glorious affairs. But if you look closer, beneath the glittering surface of Belle Epoque optimism, you'll see the cracks, small at first, hairline fractures in the foundations of the old world. A concert of power, a symphony of tension. You are living in the age of empires. The British Empire rules over 1/4 of the world's population. The French are building theirs in Africa and Indochina. The Germans, ambitious and young, have arrived late to the imperial game, but hunger for their place in the sun. Russia stretches across 2 continents, vast and slow, while Austria-Hungary is a patchwork of peoples barely held together by imperial tradition. The Ottoman Empire, aging and weakened, clings to the edges of Europe, derided as the sick man. Together, these great powers form what diplomats like to call the concert of Europe, a delicate balance of alliances, rivalries, and secret pacts. On paper, it is meant to keep peace. In reality, it is a web of dry kindling waiting for a single spark. 2 great alliance systems dominate the map. On one side stands the Triple Entente, France, Russia, and Britain, bound not by love, but by fear of German aggression. On the other side is the Triple Alliance, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy, bound by mutual interests and anxiety about encirclement. Each power believes itself strong, each trusts in its military, and none seem prepared to back down when challenged. You watch as nations pour money into arms races. Dreadnoughts, massive battleships, slide off British and German docks in a contest of naval supremacy. Armies swell in size. War plans are drawn, timed to the hour, waiting to be triggered, and still, despite the tension, life goes on. The press writes of patriotism and prestige, not apocalypse. Politicians argue in parliaments, not trenches. You, like most, believe war is improbable, or if it comes, it will be short. Nationalism and the fever of identity. As you move eastward, across the continent, you begin to feel another heat rising. Not from cannons or industry, but from the minds of peoples long denied a voice. You enter the Balkans, the mountainous, volatile region known as the powder keg of Europe. Here, Slavs, Serbs, Bosnians, Croats, Albanians, Bulgarians, Greeks, and Turks all jostle for land, language, and recognition. Nationalism burns. Hot. You walk through Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia and Herzegovina, recently annexed by Austria-Hungary. The streets are tense. Serbian nationalists rage against foreign domination. Secret societies plot in backrooms. The young are filled with fervor and hatred, determined to free their people or die trying. In Russia, you hear a different kind of nationalism, one tied to orthodoxy, Tsarist grandeur, and the defense of Slavic brothers. In France, the loss of Alsace-Lorraine to Germany in 1871 is still a festering wound. And in Germany, pride in newfound unification under Bismarck has grown into a desire for continental leadership. You begin to understand that this nationalism is no longer the noble ideal of revolutionaries or poets. It is a dangerous, virulent force. Less about freedom and more about superiority, territory, and vengeance. The illusion of stability. You sit in a Viennese cafe in 1912. A newspaper lies open on your table. Headlines speak of a new Balkan war. Tiny nations fighting the Ottomans for independence, then turning on each other in pursuit of more. You sip black coffee and think. Another local squabble, far away, soon forgotten. The great powers intervene, but only to redraw borders and settle scores. They do not yet see the storm these sparks might light. Back in Berlin, the Kaiser rides his horse proudly, dreaming of a navy to rival Britain's. In Paris, the government debates colonial policy, while artists paint wild, bright canvases of a new world. In London, the aristocracy dances while workers strike. In St. Petersburg, the Tsar prays as revolution brews in smoky basements. Everything seems both orderly and chaotic. The world is spinning faster than it ever has before. Trains race across countries, telegraphs transmit messages in seconds. Airplanes are no longer fantasies. Einstein rewrites physics. Freud explores the human soul. Marx's words infect factories and universities, and yet none of it seems truly dangerous. You, like most of your era, believe in progress. You think the world is becoming more rational, more civilized. The old wars, those of Napoleon, of Crimea, of Prussia, were bloody, yes, but contained. A great war now, you believe, would be madness. Surely no one would let it happen. The romance of war, but you're wrong. For beneath the surface of modern life lurks a terrible nostalgia. For glory, for sacrifice, for the old myths of heroism. War in the minds of many is still romantic. You hear it in the newspapers, in school books, in conversations between generals. Young men dream of uniforms and medals, of charging cavalry and noble death. You watch a military parade in Berlin. The crowds cheer. Children wave flags. No one questions where these armies might march next. The generals, grey-bearded and proud, plan for battles they do not understand. They imagine sweeping flanks and brave offensives, not machine guns and gas. Politicians bluff and posture. Unaware of how fragile the peace has become, you begin to feel it, that quiet hum beneath the laughter and luxury, the pressure building beneath the crust of civilization, an unease in the soul of the world. The final years of peace. The year is now 1913. You stand on the edge of a new century's second decade. Airships float over cities. Telephones buzz in offices. Women begin to demand the right to vote. The Olympic Games celebrate international brotherhood. Peace conferences are held in The Hague. Banks fund massive enterprises. Stock markets boom. The future looks bright, but look closely, you see border skirmishes, secret alliances, and arms deals. You hear national anthems sung louder, with more fire. You see the press inflaming public opinion, turning neighbors into enemies. You watch a train pass, knowing it could soon carry soldiers. You read poems filled with hope, and others filled with rage. You hear rumors of anarchists, of assassins, of revolutionaries with bombs in their coats and names on blacklists. And somewhere in the shadows of Sarajevo, a young man waits with a pistol in his pocket and fury in his heart. Tamudil. On the brink, you return to Paris one last time in the summer of 1914. The cafes are still full. Lovers still kiss by the Seine. Music still plays, but you now know what others do not. You know that the summer will not end in peace. You know that the dreams of this world, the carriages and empires, the top hats and treaties, will soon vanish in thunder. You feel it in the way diplomats frown, in the way officers drill, in the way monarchs grow old. The world is tired, proud, arrogant, and blind. And so you watch as the old world, dreaming it is still safe, walks unknowingly into the abyss. Chapter 2. The gunshots in Sarajevo. You find yourself in Sarajevo, a city nestled between rolling hills and ancient streets, where the east and west touch shoulders uneasily. It is June 28, 1914. The morning sun casts golden light on the cobbled roads as the townspeople prepare for a royal visit. Flags flutter, crowds begin to gather. Soldiers in crisp uniforms patrol the streets. Today, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and his wife Sophie are coming. You watch as they arrive. He tall and stiff, she elegant in a white dress. They step off the train at 9:28 a.m. The city, though restless, beneath the surface offers them smiles and cheers. But you know what they do not. Today, history waits in the shadows. The man with the pistol. You shift your gaze to a quiet young man standing among the crowd. His name is Gavrilo Princip, a 19-year-old Bosnian Serb, thin from illness and hungry with hatred. He believes he is a freedom fighter, a soldier of destiny. In his coat is a pistol. In his heart is fire. Princip is not alone. He is one of several conspirators from the secret society known as Black Hand, a radical Serbian nationalist group that seeks the unification of all South Slavs under one nation. To them, Franz Ferdinand represents imperial oppression. Killing him is not murder, it is liberation. They've smuggled weapons across borders. They've received cyanide pills to die if captured. Their plan is crude but deadly. Wait along the motorcade's route and strike. The first attempt as the archducal couple's motorcade winds through the city in open-top cars, the first assassin, Nedeljko Čabrinović, steps forward. He throws a hand grenade, but it misses. The device bounces off the folded roof of Franz Ferdinand's car and explodes beneath the vehicle behind. Chaos erupts. Smoke fills the air. Soldiers scream. Onlookers scatter. Several officers are injured. But Franz Ferdinand remains unharmed. His car speeds away. Čabrinović swallows his cyanide and leaps into the river. But the poison is old and the river is shallow. He vomits and is dragged out by police. The plot, it seems, has failed, but the morning is not over. A wrong turn, a fatal encounter. Later that day, shaken yet determined, the Archduke decides to visit the wounded from the bombing at the hospital. His advisors argue, but he insists it is his duty. You watch as the motorcade sets off once again through the winding streets, but someone forgets to inform the driver of a last-minute route change. At 10:45 a.m., the car makes a wrong turn onto Franz Joseph Street, right past a delicatessen where Gavrilo Princip is standing. He cannot believe it. Suddenly, fate brings his enemy within arm's reach. The car stalls. The driver fumbles. The Archduke tries to reverse. It is the briefest of moments, but it is all that Princip needs. He steps forward. Two shots ring out. One bullet strikes Sophie in the abdomen. The second hits Franz Ferdinand in the neck. Blood flows. Sophie whispers, "Don't die, Franz, for our children." But she collapses. Franz Ferdinand murmurs only one phrase again and again. "It is nothing. It is nothing." And then he is still. The world reacts. You stand in Vienna. As the news breaks, a stunned hush falls over the city. Flags are lowered, bells toll, but something is off. There is no mass mourning. The Archduke, though heir to the throne, was not beloved. His ideas of reform threatened the old order. Still, his murder cannot go unanswered. In Berlin, the Kaiser Wilhelm II, Franz Ferdinand's friend, is enraged. In St. Petersburg, Tsar Nicholas II watches warily. Serbia is under his protection. In Paris and London, leaders hold emergency meetings trying to assess what this means. Is it a local incident? A tragedy, yes, but not the end of the world, right? But in Vienna, inside marble halls and smoky offices, the decision is forming. They will punish Serbia. The ultimatum Austria-Hungary, with Germany's support, issues a harsh ultimatum to Serbia on July 23, 1914. The list of demands is impossible, designed not for peace, but for provocation. It calls for Serbia to suppress anti-Austrian propaganda, remove nationalist officers, and allow Austro-Hungarian officials to operate within Serbia itself. It is a violation of sovereignty. You listen as diplomats scramble. Serbia responds with surprising conciliation, agreeing to most demands, but rejecting the loss of its dignity. To the rest of Europe, it seems Serbia is trying to avoid war, but to Vienna, the time has come. The fuse is lit on July 28, 1914, exactly 1 month after the assassination. Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia. Cannon fire echoes along the Danube. You watch as the ancient machinery of alliances begins to turn. Russia mobilizes in defense of Serbia. Germany sees this as a threat and demands a halt. There is none. On August 1st, Germany declares war on Russia. France, allied with Russia, prepares for its defense. Germany activates the Schlieffen Plan, a strategy designed to defeat France quickly by invading through neutral Belgium. It is a plan drawn decades ago, but now executed with brutal speed. On August 3rd, Germany declares war on France. On August 4th, when German troops march into Belgium, Britain declares war on Germany. The world at war in less than 2 weeks. The world you once knew collapses. What began with 2 shots on a quiet street in Sarajevo has become a global inferno. Soldiers board trains with flowers tucked into their rifles. Crowds cheer. Propaganda fills the newspapers. War is presented as a noble duty, a defense of honor of civilization itself. But you know better. You watch as Europe sleepwalks into catastrophe, each step logical, each move justified by fear, pride, or alliance, yet none truly comprehending the scale of what they are unleashing. The storm has come. The storm has. Summer of 1914 is the last golden season for millions. Young men kiss their mothers goodbye. Fiancés wave handkerchiefs on platforms. Generals speak of swift victories. Politicians promise the troops will be home by Christmas. You stand at the edge of a train station, watching smoke curl from the locomotives. The world feels as though it's going on an adventure, unaware it is marching into slaughter. The bells ring. The nations have chosen. The dice are cast, and the guns of August begin to thunder. Chapter 3. The Guns of August. You are standing on the threshold of a new age, though it does not yet feel like one. The air is thick with a strange sense of glory and dread, the hum of trains and boots echoing through the capitals of Europe. In Berlin, in Paris, in London, in Vienna, and in Moscow, men in bright uniforms march through city squares with bayonets pointed toward the heavens, as if heaven itself were the next conquest. It is August 1914. The old world, with its powdered diplomats and delicate treaties, is collapsing into the thunder of mobilization. You can hear it in the steel wheels turning, in the voices of schoolboys shouting patriotic slogans, and in the growing silence behind the eyes of those who've seen too many wars to cheer for another. The Great War has begun, but no one knows just how great, how massive, how horrifying it will be. A war of illusions. You walk through the heart of Europe as governments prepare for what they believe will be a short, decisive war. Few expect it to last longer than a few months. The generals speak of timetables and railways, not blood and mud. The people believe in banners and hymns, not poison and steel. You are told it will be over by Christmas, and perhaps it could have been, if not for the arrogance, the outdated strategies, and the entangling web of alliances that now binds half the planet in a conflict no one can control. There is no turning back. The dominoes have fallen. Now the guns speak. The Schlieffen Plan in motion. On August 4th, you witness the German army enact the long-feared Schlieffen Plan, a lightning-fast invasion of Belgium and northern France. It is a bold, sweeping maneuver, intended to crush France in 6 weeks, then pivot east to deal with the Russians. Germany believes it can outwit geography, time, and politics, but there's a flaw in the plan. Belgium is neutral, protected by treaty. The German invasion of Belgium enrages Britain, which demands respect for international law. When Germany scoffs, Britain declares war. Now the British Empire joins the fray. You watch as German soldiers march through Liège, their grey uniforms moving like a shadow across green fields. The Belgians, vastly outnumbered, fight fiercely, blowing up bridges, ambushing convoys, resisting with a courage no one expected. The Germans, frustrated, respond with savagery. They burn villages, they execute civilians, they commit atrocities in Dinant, in Louvain, in Aarschot, acts that will fuel Allied propaganda and scar Belgium for a century. The rape of Belgium becomes a rallying cry, painting the German soldier as barbaric. But the army marches on. The race to Paris as you follow the German advance. The fields of northern France become a chessboard of movement and violence. French soldiers wearing bright red trousers and blue coats march into battle as though it were 1870, not 1914. The old ways of war die quickly under machine gun fire. The French launched their own plan, Plan 17, a bold counter-offensive to reclaim Alsace and Lorraine, but it is a disaster. The Germans are ready. Thousands of French troops fall in the opening days. Still, France does not break. Paris braces for attack. By early September, the Germans are just 30 miles from the French capital. The city empties. Government ministries flee south. It seems France is about to fall. But then, something unexpected happens. You watch from a dusty roadside as the French launch a desperate counterattack at the Marne River. The miracle of the Marne. On September 5, 1914, the First Battle of the Marne begins. The French and British forces, led by General Joffre and the British Expeditionary Force under Sir John French, throw everything they have into halting the German advance. Taxicabs from Paris, yes, actual cabs, ferry soldiers to the front. You witness the frantic, bloody days of this battle. Trenches are dug with bare hands. Artillery shells rip through orchards and wheat fields. Entire units vanish under the storm of fire, yet the Germans, stretched too thin and facing fierce resistance, are forced to retreat. The offensive stalls. Paris is saved, but the war does not end. Instead, something far worse happens. The Western Front freezes. As both sides realize they cannot outflank each other, they begin to dig. First for cover, then for survival, then as a strategy. By the end of 1914, a line of trenches stretches from the North Sea to the Swiss border, nearly 500 miles of mud, blood, and barbed wire. You stand inside one of these trenches, and the smell hits you first. Rot, sweat, excrement, smoke. The walls are slick with slime, the floors are waterlogged. Rats the size of cats scurry over boots and corpses alike. This is not a battlefield. It is a purgatory. The war of movement is over. Now begins the war of attrition. The Eastern Front ignites, but not all of the fighting is static. Far to the east, the vast Russian Empire has mobilized faster than Germany expected. Russian armies invade East Prussia, threatening German territory. You move now to the Eastern Front, where the war is one of open plains and sweeping maneuvers. Here, battles, far measured not in meters but in miles, and in lives. The Russians strike with two massive armies, but poor coordination dooms them. At the Battle of Tannenberg in late August, German generals Hindenburg and Ludendorff encircle and destroy the Russian Second Army. Over 90,000 Russians are captured. The defeat is humiliating, but it earns Hindenburg national fame. Still, the Russians are not broken. They return wave after wave, bleeding German and Austro-Hungarian forces alike. The Eastern Front will become a theater of suffering to rival the West, but with even fewer trenches and far more dead. New weapons, old mines. You thought this war might resemble those of the past. Noble charges, cavalry maneuvers, glory. But you were wrong. This is the birth of industrialized warfare. You see machine guns cutting down charging men by the hundreds. You hear artillery so loud it can be heard 20 miles away. Shells so big they leave craters the size of houses. You witness barbed wire, flamethrowers, armored trains, and even aerial dogfights between biplanes, fragile machines flying through skies that had never known war. And then the most terrible, weapon of all, gas. In the months to come, you will see men screaming, blinded, their lungs turned to liquid by chlorine and mustard gas. You will learn that this war is not just killing bodies, it is erasing humanity. The global war expands. What began in Europe now spreads. Japan declares war on Germany and seizes its colonies in China and the Pacific. The Ottoman Empire, tempted by Germany's promise of power, joins the Central Powers. Soon a new front opens in the Middle East. The British mobilize troops from India, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. France calls upon soldiers from Algeria, Senegal, Vietnam. Millions of men, brown and black, are drawn into a white man's war. They fight and die on battlefields they've never seen, under flags that were never theirs. This is not a European war anymore. It is a world war, and it is just beginning. The Christmas truce. Yet in the midst of this horror, something extraordinary happens. On Christmas Eve 1914, in the trenches of Flanders, you hear something unfamiliar, singing. It begins softly, a German voice. Stille Nacht. silent night. Then another joins, and another. Across the lines, the British respond with carols of their own. By dawn, soldiers emerge from their trenches, tentative, unarmed, hands raised. They meet in the shell-shocked no-man's land between. They shake hands. They exchange chocolate and cigarettes. Some even play football with makeshift balls. You watch as enemies become human beings again, if only for a moment. But it does not. Last by order of generals, the truce ends. The war resumes. The world has changed by the end of 1914. The war has claimed over 1 million lives. Soldiers, civilians, men and boys from every corner of the earth. What was supposed to be a glorious campaign has become a nightmare. You walk through the ruins of Ypres, of Louvain, of Verdun. You hear the weeping of widows and the silence of orphaned children. You look into the eyes of the wounded, the shell-shocked, the amputees, and you know this war will not end quickly. It will not end cleanly. It is not a war for land or glory or even victory anymore. It is a war for survival, and the world you once knew is already gone. Chapter 4. Verdun, the furnace of flesh and fire. You find yourself beneath a grey sky, damp with fog and gun smoke, standing on scorched earth. The trees are gone. The hills are churned to pulp. The rivers run black with oil and blood. This is not a battlefield. This is Verdun. It is February 1916, and the longest battle of the war, perhaps the longest battle of human history, is about to begin. This is where the soul of France will be tested. This is where the German Empire believes it can break its enemy, not by outmaneuvering them, but by bleeding them to death. And you, along with millions of others, are about to be swallowed whole. A war plan. Based on death, the man behind this assault is General Erich von Falkenhayn, chief of the German General Staff. He believes France is too proud, too sentimental, too bound to its history to ever abandon a city like Verdun. His logic is cruelly simple. If the French cannot retreat, then the Germans can kill them in place. "We will bleed France white," he writes in a memo to the Kaiser. He does not plan to take Verdun swiftly. He plans to let the French feed their own men into the grinder until the army collapses. This is not a war of territory. It is a war of calculation. The sacred citadel. To understand why this place matters, you must look to history. Verdun is not merely a town, it is a symbol. It is ancient, fortified, and sacred to the French military spirit. It has been a battlefield since Roman times. It stands guard on the Meuse River like a lion watching its cubs. To lose Verdun would be to lose a piece of the French soul. That is why Falkenhayn targets it. And that is why the French, against all reason, vow never to abandon it. The opening salvo at dawn on February 21st, you feel it before you hear it. The German artillery barrage begins. It is unlike anything the world has ever known. Over 1,200 guns open fire simultaneously along a 12-kilometer front. The sound is not a boom or a crack. It is a constant, thunderous roar, like 1,000 storms screaming at once. The earth itself seems to shake. You crouch in a dugout, clinging to sanity, as shell after shell pounds the ground, obliterating trenches, turning entire woods into splinters. The air is filled with smoke, shrapnel, and screams. This bombardment lasts 9 hours. When it ends, the Germans attack. The French hold the line. The German infantry surges forward through the haze, supported by elite stormtrooper units. They seize several outer forts quickly. Verdun seems to teeter on the edge of collapse, but the French respond with fury. General Philippe Pétain, a quiet, methodical man, is given command of the defense. He understands that Verdun cannot be saved by heroics. Alone, it must be supplied constantly, relentlessly. You ride with him along the Voie Sacrée, the sacred road, a single route that becomes the artery of Verdun's survival. Day and night, trucks, horses, and soldiers flood this path. Every minute, another convoy arrives. Every week, a new division rotates in, and you realize something: this is not a battle. It is a machine that eats men. Hell without fire. What you witness over the coming months defies belief. The landscape is unrecognizable. Hills are flattened. Rivers are filled with corpses. Entire regiments vanish in days. Mud mixes with blood. The air smells of death. You dig and you bleed. You fire your rifle into fog. unsure whether you're killing or surviving. You sleep in rat-infested dugouts. You march past carts of shattered limbs, past blind men holding their own eyes in their hands. There is no time for strategy, only endurance. The French motto becomes "Ils ne passeront pas, Maris," they shall not pass, and they don't. The human cost by summer, over 500,000 shells have been fired into the small region around Verdun. The forest is now a cratered wasteland. Entire units fight for days just to capture a few hundred meters. You are told to hold a trench for 24 hours. You stay for 10 days. You watch comrades cry for their mothers. You see men bury themselves in the dirt to escape the explosions. You help carry the wounded, only to find there are no more stretchers. You learn to sleep through the screams. By July, both sides have lost hundreds of thousands of men, and still the line does not move. The forts of stone and flesh in June, the Germans capture Fort Vaux after a heroic last stand by French troops, who held out for 7 days underground without food or water. They fought in pitch-black tunnels using pistols, bayonets, even bare hands. You hear the story whispered in the ranks, how Captain Reynal, refusing surrender, drank the sweat from his men's uniforms to stay alive. But not all is lost. Later, the French reclaim Fort Douaumont, the largest and most symbolic stronghold in Verdun. Its fall had been a humiliation. Its recapture becomes a rallying cry. You march forward behind a creeping barrage, watching the Germans retreat. It feels like a victory, but what you find inside the fort, dozens of dead, suffocated in their own gas masks, reminds you that in Verdun every victory is Pyrrhic. A furnace without flame. Why do you stay? Why does anyone? Because something has changed. This is no longer about winning. It's about not giving up. It's about surviving just one more week, one more day, one more hour. You stay because others stayed before you. You fight not for glory, but because you were told others died so you could be here. Verdun has become the soul of France, and now it is yours too. It consumes you, but it does not break you. The Germans falter. By the autumn of 1916, the Germans are exhausted. Their own casualties mount. The French, rotating divisions through Pétain's system, remain stronger than expected. German soldiers begin to mutter, "Verdun ist ein Fleischwolf." Verdun is a meat grinder. Falkenhayn is dismissed. The German High Command quietly begins to shift troops to another front. The French do not let up. In October and December, they launch counter-offensives and retake lost ground. The battle ends not with fanfare but with silence, as winter sets in and both sides finally stop. Verdun is over, but the price is unimaginable. The numbers that haunt in 10 months of fighting, there were 700,000 casualties, dead, wounded, or missing, for a single battle. On a front no wider than 15 miles, the town of Verdun is destroyed. The hills around it are so poisoned with metal and corpses that even a century later, they remain a red zone, uninhabitable, untouchable. You walk away with a body intact, but a soul shattered. You carry the ghosts with you, every soldier does. Legacy of Verdun does not change the war's direction. It does not end the stalemate, but it changes the war. It becomes the symbol of endurance, of futility, of sacrifice, beyond logic. To the French, it is a testament to national will. To the Germans, a bitter lesson in arrogance. To you, it is a place where the old world finally dies, because here no myths survive, no honor remains untainted, no war seems noble, just mud and fire, and the knowledge that human beings built this hell themselves and chose to stay. Chapter 5. The Somme. Blood in the trenches, you wake to the sound of whistles, not birdsong. It's July the 1st, 1916. The sky is low and overcast above the rolling fields of northern France. Somewhere, beyond the fog, the river Somme snakes quietly. Through the countryside, you are part of the British Expeditionary Force, and you are about to step into the bloodiest day in the history of the British Army. No one tells you that. Instead, you're told this will be the breakthrough, the moment the Allies tear a hole in the German lines and rush through in glory. You believe it. You have to, because if you didn't, you wouldn't climb out of this trench, the road to the Somme. You've been in France for months, training, drilling, waiting. The plan for the Somme was meant to be simple. A massive Allied offensive, British and French armies advancing side by side to relieve pressure on the battered French forces at Verdun and punch through the German defenses. But reality shifted. Verdun devoured the French army's strength. So the Somme, once a joint operation, became primarily a British effort, a baptism by fire for the citizen soldiers of Kitchener's army, young men who had volunteered in 1914, swept up by posters and promises, still believing war had some nobility left in it. Now they faced the machine, 7 days of fire. For a week before the attack, British artillery fires over 1.5 million shells at the German lines. You hear them constantly, like a distant thunder that never stops. They tell you the bombardment will destroy the enemy trenches, cut their barbed wire, obliterate their machine guns. All you'll need to do is walk forward and occupy what's left. You believe it, you have to. But the German dugouts go deep, and their wire remains, and their machine guns are not only intact, they are waiting. 0 hour, you stand on the fire step, heart pounding. Around you, young men joke and smoke to mask their fear. Some kneel and pray. Some write final letters they'll never send. At 7:30 a.m., the whistles blow. You go over the top. You climb the ladder, boots slipping on muddy wood, rifle in hand. You step into no man's land, and then the world becomes metal. The killing ground. The moment your boots touch open ground, the machine guns open up. German MG-08s rake the field with bullets. Entire lines of men fall before they can take 10 steps. Shells erupt around you, flinging dirt and body parts into the air. Screams rise above the cacophony. You duck, stumble, press forward. There is nowhere to hide. The barbed wire remains. Thick coils of it, unmoved by shells. You find yourself tangled. You cut, curse, crawl. Bullets whip past your head. Your friend beside you drops, face open and red. You keep moving, because stopping means dying. Massacre by the end of that first day. Nearly 60,000 British soldiers are casualties. Over 19,000 are dead. One day, you survive. Barely. You find a shallow shell hole and press your body into it. Around you lie the bodies of boys in uniforms, too clean, eyes still wide with confusion. The attack was a failure, but it is only the beginning. Mud and madness. The battle continues, for months. You live in the trenches. You eat stale biscuits and cold tea. You sleep among rats. The mud never dries. It soaks your boots, fills your rifle barrel, seeps into your soul. Each morning, new attacks. Each night, new names missing from roll call. The Somme becomes a furnace not of fire but of attrition. Neither side gains much ground, just meters, often lost the next day. But the killing continues, because the generals believe the enemy must be worn down. If enough Germans die, surely the line will break. So you die too. New machines, old pain in. September, a new weapon appears on the battlefield, the tank. You see them, huge iron beasts crawling forward on caterpillar tracks, belching. Smoke bristling with guns. You cheer at first. Hope flickers in your chest, but the tanks are slow, many break down, some get stuck. The enemy adapts quickly. The future of war has arrived, but for now, it still belongs to mud and blood. A landscape from Helby October, the fields of the Somme are no longer fields. They are mud lakes, craters, and shattered corpses. Entire trees are reduced to black stumps. Horses lie bloated in the muck. Trenches collapse under the weight of rain and rot. You dig new ones. You fight for inches. You wonder what day it is. You begin to forget what home smelled like, the Christmas that never comes by. December, the battle is finally called off. The British have advanced about 6 miles. The cost? Over 1 million casualties, British, French, German combined. And for what? You ask that question often, quietly, in letters, in whispers, in silence. No one answers. A war that eats generations. The Somme changes everything. For Britain, it is the death of innocence. The flower of a generation, the teachers, poets, sons and clerks who filled the ranks, now lies buried in shallow graves across the fields of Picardy. For you, the Somme leaves a permanent scar. You begin to see war not as glory, not as duty, but as a system designed to consume men and produce only silence. And yet, you stay, because there's nowhere else to go. The war will go on. The front holds. There is no victory. There is only the war, and now you know what it is. Not flags or songs, not honor, just mud, and the knowledge that no man who walks into this storm walks out the same. Chapter 6. The War at Sea and in the Skies. The globalization of conflict. You are no longer just a soldier of the trenches. You are a witness to a war that has slipped its borders, spread its wings, and cast its shadow over land, sea, and sky. What began as a European struggle has become a global catastrophe, reaching distant oceans, colonies, and even the heavens above. You may have joined this war believing it was a matter of loyalty to king or emperor. Now, as it evolves, you begin to realize it is not just armies that are fighting, it is civilizations. A new front. The oceans turn to steel. You first hear about it in whispers, about ships disappearing beneath waves, about convoys sunk without warning. At first, it seems like faraway news. You're in France, stuck in the endless grind of mud and fire. But soon you understand, the oceans have become a battlefield, just as vicious and uncertain as the one under your boots. The British Royal Navy is the mightiest fleet in the world, but the German U-boats, stealthy submarines, armed with torpedoes, are rewriting the rules. They are the sharks of the war, attacking unseen and vanishing before they can be struck. Merchant ships vanish without warning. Civilians drown, food supplies falter, and suddenly, the British Isles feel like an isolated fortress, surrounded, not by walls but by water, and under siege. The dreadnoughts clash, the Battle of Jutland. It is May 1916, and you're stationed inland, but news travels quickly when something this big happens. Off the coast of Denmark's Jutland Peninsula, the largest naval battle of the war erupts between the British Grand Fleet and the German High Seas Fleet. You listen to the details in the quiet moments, imagining the chaos. Great battleships, dreadnoughts with steel hulls thicker than a man is tall, trading blows like titans. Shells screaming across the waves. Night battles lit by explosions. Over 250 ships engaged, more than 100,000 sailors involved. The British suffer heavy losses, 14 ships sunk, over 6,000 men lost. The Germans lose 11 ships, with 12,500 dead. Strategically, it's inconclusive. The High Seas Fleet retreats to port, and Britain retains naval dominance. But emotionally, the myth of invincibility is shattered on both sides. From then on, the German Navy places its hopes more on its silent hunters, the U-boats, unrestricted submarine warfare. Total war below the surface. By 1917, the rules have changed. Germany resumes unrestricted submarine warfare. Every ship, merchant, passenger, neutral, is a target. No warning, no rescue. You hear of the Lusitania, sunk 2 years earlier with nearly 1,200 dead, including Americans. But now even more ships go down. The sea becomes a graveyard. Thousands drown. Supplies to Britain dwindle. The fear of starvation becomes real. And with it, so does America's anger. It is not just a war between soldiers now, it is a war against entire populations. Food is rationed, blockades choke ports, children grow thin. War touches everyone, even those who thought distance would protect them. Across the globe, the colonial fronts, you look at your comrades. Some are from Canada, Australia, New Zealand. Their homes lie half a world away, yet here they are, knee-deep, in European mud. But the war has not only drawn men from the colonies into Europe, it has also dragged the fight into the colonies. In Africa, the Germans battle British and French colonial troops. The terrain is unfamiliar, the climate brutal. Disease kills more than bullets, but still they fight. In the Middle East, the Ottoman Empire holds a vast stretch of land, stretching from the Arabian deserts to the shores of the eastern Mediterranean. Here too the war rages. You hear of a British officer, T.E. Lawrence, later called Lawrence of Arabia, who rides with Arab rebels against the Ottomans. You hear of the Sykes-Picot Agreement, carved in secret between Britain and France, promising to divide the spoils of the Middle East when the fighting ends. Even as men bleed in the trenches, empires plan for what they will gain, not just what they might lose. The sky opens, a new dimension of war. The first time you see an aircraft, you're startled. It is a fragile thing, canvas and wire and thudding engine. It hovers above the trenches like a curious bird. You wave, it disappears. Soon you realize these are not birds, they are predators. The early years of war saw planes used only for reconnaissance, observing enemy positions, but quickly they evolve. Fighter planes emerge, armed with machine guns, their pilots dueling in the skies in what newspapers will later romanticize as dogfights. You envy their view, their escape from the mud, until you see one spiral down in flames and... Remember, there is no safe place in this war. The Red Baron, Manfred von Richthofen, becomes a name everyone knows. He claims dozens of kills, flying with grace and lethality, his plane painted crimson. But even he will not survive, and then come the bombers. They strike cities, London, Paris, Antwerp. Not military targets, but civilians. You hear of bombs dropped on homes, on schools. The sky is no longer a ceiling. It is a source of fear, a world set ablaze. You receive a letter from home. It speaks not of your village or your family, but of the world unraveling. In Russia, the Tsar grows weak. Protest erupts in Petrograd. Something is changing. In the Balkans, Serbian guerrillas continue to fight Austro-Hungarian control. In Italy, the front in the Alps is frozen, deadly, and unmoving. In Mesopotamia and Palestine, British troops inch toward ancient cities, Baghdad, Jerusalem, carving history into conflict. It is no longer a war for victory. It is a war of survival, and it is being fought everywhere. The American entry, a sleeping giant, awakes April 1917. America declares war on Germany. You read the news with quiet surprise. For 3 years they stayed away, believing the ocean would protect them. But the U-boats and the Zimmermann telegram, a German plot to ally with Mexico, brought them in. At first it changes little, but you sense something in the wind. The Americans come with fresh troops, abundant supplies, boundless optimism. You envy them. They do not yet carry the scars. They will. Technology outpaces. Humanity you once believed bravery won wars, now you understand machines do. Artillery grows. Larger, more precise. Aircraft get faster. Tanks improve. Radio becomes a weapon of coordination. Even medicine adapts. Mobile hospitals, antiseptics, field surgery. The pace of innovation is dizzying, but with every advance, death grows more efficient. Now you no longer count losses by names. You count them in thousands per day. You do not feel your soul harden. But it does. The wars wait sometimes in the rare hours of silence. You wonder how long this can go on. Your enemies are not monsters. The few prisoners you've seen are just boys, frightened, hungry, shaking in their coats. You have more in common with them than with the men in suits drawing maps behind desks. Yet still the orders come, and the world grows darker. The global war by the end of 1917. This is no longer a European war. It is a world war in every sense. Battles are fought in Europe, Africa, the Middle East, and the Pacific. Nations from 5 continents send troops, supplies, or ships. Civilian populations are mobilized like never before. Women enter factories. Children knit socks for soldiers. Families ration food. Technology bridges the gaps between nations and creates new ways to kill. And you, once a soldier from a quiet town, are now part of something far larger than yourself. Something monstrous. The world changed irreversibly. You understand now. Even if peace comes, especially if peace comes, the world will not go back to what it was. Borders will shift. Empires will crumble. Nations will rise. Entire ideologies are being forged in the fire. This war is not just about territory. It is about the future, and you are trapped in the middle of it trying to survive. Chapter 7. Revolution in the East. The fall of the Tsars and the rise of Red Russia. You have watched men fall by the thousands. You've seen cities crumble, fields scarred by shell fire, and skies filled with smoke. But now, you begin to witness something even more unsettling, an empire unraveling from within. To the east, the Russian giant is collapsing, not under the weight of enemy shells, but under the weight of its own history, its own suffering, its own people. This is not just a battlefield report. This is a revolution, and it will change the course of the of the world. The cracks in the Colossus. You hear it first as a rumor among prisoners. The Tsar is finished. Russia, the empire of endless winter, has always seemed both powerful and distant to you. With its sprawling borders and millions of soldiers, it was a terrifying ally to have on your side, or a daunting foe to face. But now, the truth spreads. Like frost through the trenches, Russia is coming apart. The signs were always there. Soldiers freezing in outdated uniforms, rifles shared between men, food lines stretching for hours in St. Petersburg, now renamed Petrograd to sound less German. Behind the glitter of palaces and uniforms, Russia is starving. And in the war's third year, the people finally have enough. The February Revolution. When the people rose, it is March 1917 on your calendar, but in Russia, where the old Julian system still reigns, they call it February. Protests erupt in Petrograd. Women march for bread. Factory workers go on strike. Soldiers sent to quell the riots begin to join them instead. The spark becomes a fire. The once unchallenged Tsar Nicholas II hesitates. He is isolated, unaware, and surrounded by advisors who whisper false comforts. But the fire spreads. Trains stop running. The Duma, the Russian parliament, defies the Tsar. Petrograd becomes a city in open rebellion. And then it happens. The Tsar abdicates. You read the headline with disbelief. An empire that stretched from the Baltic to the Pacific, ruled by a divine monarch for centuries, has just been decapitated by protesters with empty stomachs. Nicholas II gives up his throne. His family, wife Alexandra and their children, including young Alexei, the hemophiliac heir, are placed under house arrest. The Romanov dynasty, which ruled for over 300 years, is gone, just like that. A provisional hope, but no peace in the vacuum left by the Tsar. A new government steps in, the provisional government led by liberals and moderates. They promise reform, land redistribution and civil rights, but most importantly, they promise to continue the war. This is where the hope begins to fade. You see it in the eyes of Russian prisoners, in letters from Eastern Front allies. Russia is exhausted. Its people want peace, not speeches. Its soldiers want food, not medals. But the provisional government cannot or will not withdraw from the war. Because of that choice, they sign their own death warrant. Enter the Bolsheviks. Lenin returns. Into this chaos returns a man you had perhaps never heard of, Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov, better known as Lenin. He is smuggled into Russia by the Germans through sealed train cars, hoping his return will destabilize the Russian war effort. It is a gamble, and it works. Lenin is a revolutionary with one goal: to destroy the existing order. He does not believe in compromise. He believes in the people's dictatorship, in violent revolution, in reshaping society from its foundations. You hear his slogans echo through the eastern winds: peace, land, bread. All power to the Soviets, and people listen, especially soldiers. Soviets rise, authority dies. The term Soviet once meant a local council of workers or soldiers, but now these Soviets begin to rival the authority of the provisional government. Factories, army units, even entire cities swear allegiance not to ministers in Petrograd, but to their own councils. And in October 1917, November by Western calendars, Lenin and the Bolsheviks make their move. It is not a dramatic battle. There is no siege of a palace. The Winter Palace is stormed with little resistance. Most of the city's population sleeps through it, but what happens that night will ripple for generations. The Bolsheviks seize power. Russia is now a revolutionary. State. Red versus white. The civil war begins. You might think the war is over for Russia. In one sense, it is. Lenin promises peace with Germany. But now a civil war erupts across the vast empire. The Bolsheviks, now calling themselves Reds, fight for the revolution, for socialism, for a new world. Their enemies, the Whites, are a loose coalition of monarchists, nationalists, foreign troops, and democratic reformers. They fight to restore Russia, to stop the red tide. The country fractures. Railroads are sabotaged. Cities change hands weekly. The countryside starves. You hear tales of horrors from the east, executions of nobles, clergy, landowners, pogroms against Jews, red and white terror campaigns, fields where neighbors slit each other's throats in the name of ideology, and at the heart of it, the Romanovs. In July 1918, Nicholas II, his wife and all their children are taken to a cellar in Yekaterinburg. There, they are executed by Bolshevik agents. The old world is not just falling. It is being erased. The Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. Exit from the war as chaos reigns in Russia. The Bolsheviks fulfill their promise to end the war. In March 1918, Lenin signs the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk with Germany. It is a disastrous peace. Russia cedes enormous territory. Ukraine, Belarus, the Baltics, parts of Poland. Over 1 million square kilometers. It loses a third of its population, a majority of its coal and iron, and much of its industry. But Lenin accepts the price. For him, the survival of the revolution is more important than land or pride. You read the treaty and feel stunned. A major power has left the war, not through victory or defeat, but by cutting itself off. The Eastern Front collapses. German troops shift west. The Allies brace for the storm. Western reactions, shock and strategy in. France and Britain, the Russian collapse is seen as a betrayal. They had counted on a two-front war. Now Germany can concentrate everything on the Western Front. But you also hear something stranger. Western powers, Britain, France, even the United States, send troops into Russia. Not to fight Germany, but to support the White forces. The war against Germany now overlaps with the war against Bolshevism. Lines blur. Objectives twist. No one is sure anymore what victory looks like. The birth of the Soviet Union. The Civil War rages for years, but slowly, the Reds grind down their enemies. Their propaganda is sharper. Their organization is ruthless. Their use of terror, systematic and cold, succeeds. By 1922, the Bolsheviks win. Lenin establishes the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR. A one-party state. No kings, no nobles, no private property. A new order is born, not only in Russia, but in the imagination of the world. For some, it is a beacon of liberation. For others, a nightmare realized. Either way, you feel it. The old empire is dead. What it means for you. The Russian exit gives Germany temporary hope, but it comes too late. American troops begin to arrive in France. German morale cracks. The Western Front shifts again. And you, weary and wounded, know that nothing will ever be the same. Because this war was not just about trenches, rifles, or borders. It was about revolutions, not only on battlefields, but in hearts, governments, and ideologies. The world of emperors is fading. The world of people, angry, organized, radical, is rising. And you, still breathing in the mud of Europe, feel history reshaping itself all around you. Chapter 8. The Last Gambles. Germany's final offensives and the road to collapse. You are still standing, barely. Your boots sink into churned mud. Your ears still ring with the echoes of shellfire, and your soul feels like it's aged 100 years. But there's a shift in the air now, one you can feel in your bones. The war is no longer about glory. It is about survival. And for Germany, survival demands one final gamble. With Russia gone from the war, the Eastern Front has vanished. Germany now stands before a grim and golden opportunity to throw everything, every man, every gun, every drop of strength against the West. Because the Americans are coming. And if Germany doesn't break through before they arrive in full force, all is lost. The Kaiser's desperation, you've heard the slogans, you've read the speeches. But behind closed doors, even Kaiser Wilhelm II is uneasy. Germany is starving. Strikes ripple across its factories. Cities shiver through winters. Without coal, soldiers grumble in the trenches. The people are losing patience. But General Erich Ludendorff, the man truly running Germany's war effort, is convinced one mighty blow in the West can still win the war. He calls it the Kaiserschlacht, the Kaiser's battle. In the spring of 1918, Germany prepares for its final offensive. The enemy trenches are weak, morale is low, the British and French are exhausted. And the Americans? Still training, still arriving by the shipload. There is a narrow window and Ludendorff plans to smash it open. Stormtroopers and shock you watch in amazement at what Germany unleashes. This is not the same war of 1914. The Germans have learned, adapted, hardened. They unleash stormtroopers, specially trained assault units that don't waste time on strongpoints. They infiltrate, bypass, and encircle. They use poison gas, flamethrowers, light machine guns. They break the stalemate with speed and shock, and it works. In March 1918, Operation Michael begins. The German line erupts like a tidal wave. The British Fifth Army buckles. Entire units are pushed back. Roads are clogged with refugees and retreating soldiers. The Germans advance 60 kilometers in days, an unthinkable gain after years of stagnation. Paris is once again within reach. Shells land on the city, panic stirs. The French prepare to evacuate government offices. The Allies tremble. Victory slips through their fingers, but victory is slippery. Germany's advances come at a terrible price. The stormtroopers die in droves, elite units bleeding out first. Supply. Lines cannot keep up. Horses collapse in exhaustion. Soldiers loot villages for food. Gasoline and ammunition run dry. And worst of all, there is no strategic goal. Ludendorff throws punch after punch. Michael, Georgette, Gneisenau, Blücher, York. Each time the Germans gain ground, but each gain costs them more men than they can afford. And with every mile their momentum weakens. Meanwhile, the Allies dig in, stabilize, reinforce, and in their rear, the first wave of American troops begins. To arrive, you see them, fresh-faced, tall, well-fed. They speak with strange accents and carry new weapons. They're inexperienced but eager. And there are more of them every day. Germany's window is closing. The Second Battle of the Marne. The turning point in July 1918, Germany launches what will be its final major offensive, the Second Battle of the Marne. Ludendorff hopes to split. The French armies enforce a collapse, but this time the Allies are ready. They lure the Germans into a trap, allowing them to advance into a salient, then strike from the flanks. French, British, American, and even Italian troops pour into the fight, and for the first time, you see the Germans retreat. It is not just a tactical withdrawal, it is the beginning of the end. The Allies now seize the initiative. They begin their own offensive, a rolling series of attacks known as the 100 Days Offensive. One front, then another. German lines bend, break, fall apart. You sense it. The tide has turned, the collapse from within. But Germany is not only being defeated at the front, it is imploding from within. On the home front, the situation is dire. Food is scarce, rations are cruel. The British blockade chokes off supplies, children die from malnutrition, the working class riots, even the military command begins to fracture. Soldiers desert, sailors mutiny. In late October 1918, sailors in Kiel refuse to sail on a suicidal mission. Their mutiny sparks a revolution. Workers' and soldiers' councils begin to seize control of cities. Echoes of what you saw in Russia. Bavaria declares itself a socialist republic, and in Berlin, angry crowds call for the abdication of the Kaiser. The German Empire is disintegrating, its people no longer willing to die for its survival. The fall of the Kaiser on November 9, 1918. The unthinkable happens. Kaiser Wilhelm II abdicates and flees to the Netherlands. Germany, the proud empire that once stood astride Europe, becomes a republic overnight. Power shifts to the hands of civilian leaders. Among them, a man named Friedrich. Kleibert tries to hold the crumbling state together. You realize the end is near, but not just the end of fighting, the end of an era. The empires of Europe are dying. The world they built, the wars they fought, the crowns they wore, all of it is sinking into history's grave. The armistice, 11/11/11. Then comes the moment you have prayed for and feared. November 11th, 1918. At 11 a.m., on the 11th day of the 11th month, the guns fall silent. The armistice is signed in a train carriage in the Compiègne forest in France. The Germans surrender unconditionally. The war is over. But there is no celebration in your heart. You do not cheer. You do not wave flags. You stand in the mud surrounded by shattered trees and the bones of friends, and you weep because you know what it cost, what victory looks like. You survived. But at what cost? Over 10 million soldiers are dead, more than 20 million wounded. Millions more civilians killed by famine, disease, and bombardment. Empires have vanished. Austria-Hungary, Ottoman, German, Russian. Maps are redrawn. Kingdoms erased. Revolutions. Born, you look at your hands and wonder who you were before this. A clerk, a student, a farmer. That person is gone now. You are something else. A witness, a ghost, a survivor of the war to end all wars. And though the world is quiet now, you can already hear the next storm brewing. Beneath the treaties, beneath the ruins, beneath the illusion of peace. But for now, you sit and breathe and wait for the dawn. Chapter 9. A bitter peace. Versailles and the seeds of the next war. You have just emerged from the nightmare of war, but the scars you carry are far from healed. The guns may have fallen silent, yet the world you return to feels fractured, unrecognizable, and haunted by uncertainty. The victors of the Great War have gathered in the grand halls of Versailles, beneath gilded ceilings and beneath the watchful eyes of history. They come to decide the fate of the defeated, Germany and the other Central Powers. But instead of healing wounds, the peace talks threaten to deepen them. You listen as harsh words and bitter accusations fill the air. Leaders like Woodrow Wilson, David Lloyd George, and Georges Clemenceau negotiate, each with their own vision, their own demands. Wilson speaks of a peace without victory, a world where justice and self-determination reign. But Clemenceau, scarred by the devastation wrought upon France, wants revenge and security. Lloyd George seeks to protect Britain's interests and maintain its empire. You watch as the Treaty of Versailles takes shape, a document that will reshape Europe and plant the seeds for future conflict. Germany is forced to accept full responsibility for the war, a war guilt clause that burns like acid in the hearts of millions. Reparations are demanded, billions of marks that will cripple the economy and inflame national humiliation. Territories are stripped away. Alsace-Lorraine returns to France. Vast lands are ceded to Poland, and overseas colonies are seized by the victors. The once mighty German military is reduced to a shadow of itself, forbidden tanks, aircraft, and submarines. You hear the anguished cries of those who see this as a betrayal, no peace, but a punishment. The Weimar Republic struggles to hold the country together as extremist voices rise, preaching vengeance and renewal. Across Europe, empires crumble further. The Austro-Hungarian and Ottoman empires are carved into new nations, ethnic groups clash, and the new borders sow confusion and resentment. You realize the peace is fragile, built on compromises and bitterness, and beneath its surface, the old conflicts and new grievances simmer dangerously. You wonder, have the leaders truly learned from the carnage, or have they only postponed the inevitable? As you look toward the horizon, you sense that this peace is only the beginning of another chapter, one that may plunge the world once again into darkness. Chapter 10. The Legacy of the Great War. A world forever changed. You stand at the edge of a world forever altered by the Great War, a war that promised to end all wars, but instead shattered old certainties and sowed the seeds of new conflicts. The guns are silent, the trenches abandoned, but the echoes of 4 years of unimaginable suffering still reverberate through every corner of the globe. You carry memories of comrades lost to mud, machine guns, and poison gas. You remember the endless rain and choking smoke, the nights spent listening for artillery shells, the faces of those who never came home. Your body is marked by wounds, some visible, many hidden deep within your mind and soul. The Great War changed more than battlefields, it changed the very fabric of society. The human cost, the staggering toll of the war, is impossible to ignore. Over 16 million dead, 21 million wounded, millions more scarred physically and mentally. Entire generations decimated, families shattered, communities destroyed, dreams extinguished. the war's survivors often find themselves haunted by grief and guilt, struggling to reintegrate into a society that can barely comprehend their trauma. You witness the rise of a new awareness about the horrors of modern industrial warfare. What it meant to be cannon fodder in a conflict that devoured millions like grass in a wildfire. Veterans' hospitals fill with men suffering from what they call shell shock, an invisible wound that breaks spirits as surely as bullets break. Bones political upheaval and revolution. The war's end triggers a wave of political upheaval. Empires collapse, Austro-Hungarian, Ottoman, Russian and German, replaced by fragile republics and new nations struggling to find their identity. You watch as Bolsheviks seize power in Russia, plunging the world's largest country into a brutal civil war. Communism spreads fear and hope alike across Europe. Nationalist movements flare, redrawing maps and igniting ethnic conflicts. In the Balkans, the tinderbox that lit the war's fuse, tensions remain dangerously high. The League of Nations is born, an unprecedented attempt at international cooperation designed to prevent another catastrophe. But you know it will be tested, and its weaknesses exposed. Social and cultural shifts. The war also transforms society and culture. The roles of women change as they step into factories and offices while men fight abroad. You see new voices demanding rights and equality. The war shakes faith in progress and reason. Artists and writers rebel against old ideals, creating works that express disillusionment, fragmentation, and the absurdity of human conflict. You feel the pulse of the lost generation, those who came of age in the trenches and now grapple with a world that no longer feels familiar or safe. Economic consequences. The global economy reels from the war's destruction. Infrastructure is ruined, trade disrupted, debts mount. You see hyperinflation cripple Germany, and economic hardship fuel political extremism. The Great Depression looms on the horizon, a dark shadow that will deepen the world's wounds. The fragile peace and the road to the next war. You understand now that the Treaty of Versailles, while ending the fighting, fails to create lasting peace. The harsh terms breed resentment in Germany and elsewhere. You sense the restless tide of nationalism and revenge rising. The seeds of another devastating conflict are quietly being sown. You think of the words spoken during the war's early days, the belief it would end all wars. But history is cruel and unpredictable. You are left to wonder, how will the world heal? How will humanity learn from this nightmare? And will the next generation inherit a legacy of peace or violence? As you close this chapter of history, you carry with you the stories of sacrifice and survival, of failure and hope. You are witness to a world forever changed, a world that remembers the cost of war and the desperate hope for peace.